Okay, we are rolling into Shir haShirim, Song of Songs, class number 21, Givaldic. So let us announce tonight's dedications. The class tonight, hey, mute. The class tonight is dedicated to the yard site of Dr. Deutsch's father, Shmuel ben Emil. Did I say that correctly?
Absolutely.
Shmuel ben Emil, alav shalom. The neshama should have an aliyah, along with the following people: Shlomo Yaakov ben Yitzchak, his neshama should have an aliyah. Yitzchak ben Yisrael, who is Shoshana Marshak's uncle, for those of you who know the Marshaks who used to live here in Seattle, and a friend's father, Shlomo Chaim Arya Leib ben Shmuel Nachamu, and my father as well, Yisrael Tuvia ben Eliezer. Also, a refuah shlema. The learning should be as chos for refuah shlema for Minya Hinda Bas Devora. I just got a notification that my computer battery is low, which is something of a disaster, but I have a charger, so bear with me. Let me see if I can charge it quickly without too much ado. Who joined us just now?
It was me, Rabbi Nachshon.
Oh, Nachshon, I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, Hashem. I'm good to see. I'm happy to see all you guys, all your halo faces.
I'm plugging this in. Hang on.
Good to see you, Rabbi Nachshon.
Shalom Aleichem.
Alechem Shalom.
Sorry about that. Sometimes we forget important things. Okay, questions before we begin? On past.
I think I'm ready.
Anything past? Okay. So let's go to, I'm going to share my screen. I hope I'm going to share my screen. Okay. And there we go. Okay. Make it nice and big. Let me scroll up. Look at these interesting. This is what happens when Sefaria lets you down. You know what happens when Sefaria lets you down? You have to walk over to the shelf and you have to pick up real Sfarim and you have to open them up and you have to find commentaries that haven't been digitized yet, you know? So I actually had to take pictures of pages to get the text into my Google Doc of commentaries. Oh, you vault. Okay. Okay. Now, quick review of last time. We began the third parak, which maybe we'll finish tonight. Who knows? We began the third parak with the tribulations, the trouble of the Jews sinning with the golden calf and with the spies, which caused the separation of the Shekhinah from the Jews. And she searched and she searched and she searched, and says finally she found when, it says, as she was passing the watchman, which we said was Moshe and Aaron, either shortly before their departure from the world, which could be possibly, we said, with the death of the generation of the spies. To some degree, we saw that the Dibur, the speech of Hashem, returned to Moshe. Maybe that's what it meant that she found him. But also we saw that slightly afterwards, we have Yehoshua coming into the land of Israel, and the magnificent spectacle of bringing all the Jews together underneath the Aron as a sign that the Shekhinah was with them and they would conquer the land. So one of these two things, perhaps both, but around the time, you might say, of the changing of the guard between Moshe's leadership and Yehoshua's leadership, we have the reuniting of the Jewish people with the Shekhinah. So we came to a happy ending with the end of verse 4. And now we're at verse 5, which is a very familiar verse because it is identical to a verse that we encountered before. As I put in the note here, chapter 2, verse 7 is the exact same verse. So this is kind of what you might call a refrain. Like a song has a refrain, you have a verse, and then you have a refrain, like the chorus, right? And a verse and a refrain. So we came to sort of a happy ending of one section, and we said this refrain, and then we had another we had a sort of a repeat of the story with a little bit of a more tumultuous expression of the relationship, comes to a happy resolution, and we come to this refrain, and I'll go ahead and read it. It says as follows: Hishbati eschem Benos Yerushalayim bitzvaos o be'ailos hasadeh im ta'iru ve'im te'oreru es ha'ahava ad shetechpatz, which means, you may remember this, Hishbati eschem benos Yerushalayim, daughters of Jerusalem, I made you swear, and you remember this? I made you swear, O daughters of Jerusalem, bitzvaos o be'ailos hasadeh, I made you swear with Tzvaos, we said, are female tzvis, female gazelles, or with the Ailos Hasada, the female ayal, which is like we said, a hart, H-A-R-T, something like that. That may not be exact translation. These animals of the field. What does it mean that? Anyone remember from that? What does it mean that she said, I made you swear by these animals? Does anyone remember?
Do not spoil Hashem's love for Yisrael, or you will become Hefker.
Oh, so that if you would break this vow that I will describe, what's going to happen is you're going to become hefker, you're going to become ownerless like these animals of the field, meaning you'll be fair game for the slaughter, fair game for somebody to come along and eat. Like if you don't want to get destroyed, then keep this vow. But if you want to be destroyed, if you want to be consumed like the animals of the field, then go ahead and break this vow. And just a reminder that in the Torah, when it talks about eating meat freely, it says katsevi v'ka'ayal. It gives these two species when the Torah refers to eating meat. So you want to get eaten? Break your vow. You don't want to get eaten? Keep your vow. And here is the vow. Im ta'iru ve'im te'oreru es ha'ahava ad shetechpatz. That you will not ta'iru, which means you will not try to draw me away from my relationship with Hashem. To leha'ir is like to awaken or to arouse. I think I'm saying this correctly, that you're going to try to seduce me to come follow your gods. Don't do that. Don't interfere in this relationship. Also, v'im te'oreru, nor shall you object to my relationship on the grounds of saying, you're not the chosen ones of Hashem, I'm the chosen one of Hashem. And so you Jews get lost because the new relationship between God and his people is between him and me. Those who would claim that they're the true heirs, as it were, of God's chosen on earth, or those who would try to pull us away from God towards their religions. Don't do these two things. Don't do this es ha'ahava, to the love, to this love relationship. Ad shetechpatz literally would say like until he desires, but that means so long as he desires me, or as long as there is desire really between me and him, while the relationship is going on with desire between me and Hashem, don't get involved. Don't get in between. Don't mess with it. Because otherwise you're going to be destroyed like the animals of the field. Does this sound familiar at all? Emmett, you remembered. Anyone else remember this from earlier? So now again, when we come to this happy ending and there is a closeness again, this is when she turns to the nations of the world and she says, don't mess. Don't mess. Okay, so I'm not going to go into Rashi here because he more or less just says that again, which is the explanation of this verse from before. He just says it a little more briefly now, but we'll move on. Fine. Verse 5 in the bag, ready to move on? Okay. Now, the next three verses, 6, 7, and 8, we did them already. Back in here. I put it in the notes here. In chapter 1, verse 16, we were talking about, we got into the topic of the Mishkan being God's bed. That the Mishkan, and specifically the Kodesh HaGadashim, more specifically between the staves of the Aron, being, which we saw with Yoshua, by the way, being this place of intimate joining between the Jewish people and God. So when Rashi was making the case of interpreting this bed as referring to the Mishkan, he referred to these verses. And when we were doing that Rashi, we went ahead and we learned all these verses. So I'm going to read them quickly and just remind us what he said. And I want to go I want to bang it out real fast. So it says, Mizos, again, here we're going in sequence in chapter 3, but we saw this already. Mizos olam min hamidbar. Who is this one rising up from the desert? Now, Zos is feminine. So it's like, who is this female? Who is this woman coming up from the desert? Now, these are the nations of the world speaking. The nations are seeing, and I think Rashi said maybe even specifically, I don't remember exactly, the nations of Canaan, they were seeing the Jews coming up out of the desert, and they say, who is this? She's coming kesimeros ashan, like pillars of smoke. And we said those are the pillar of cloud that led the Jews in the desert. It's the pillar of fire that led the Jews in the desert. It's even the smokestack that was created by the burning of the incense. There were many of these smoke or cloud or fire pillars that came along with the Jewish people through the desert. So that's the description. Who is this woman coming up from the desert like pillars of smoke? Mikuteres mor ulvona. She is burning spices of myrrh and levona. Again, this is a description of the ketores, mikuteres, you see, like ketores, the spices that were burned in the Mishkan, mikol avkas rochel, from all the powders of the merchant, meaning all the different spices that are sold. She's got all these spices she's burning. She's making smokestacks. Who is this? He named mitasosha l'shlomo. Behold, it is the bed of Shlomo. And that was a description, Rashi said, of the Mishkan, Ohel Moed. We could say even more specifically, Kodesh Kodashim, the Aron. It's the bed of Shlomo. But what I didn't say back then, which occurred to me since then, is that if it's the bed of Shlomo, what's she doing in it? It would almost be like, oh, you see King Shlomo, there's King Shlomo coming, and he's being carried on his bed. Like you could imagine, like royalty is sort of carried on this bed. Why is it referring to her? So I think if it's not obvious, the point is you see that she's in Shlomo's bed. Everybody knows King Shlomo, but who's the woman in his bed? Who is? In other words, if King Shlomo would have a woman being carried upon his bed, this must be a very special woman. I mean, who could be in King Shlomo's bed? So that I think is the wonder here. Right? He named it Tasosha Shlomo. Behold, it's the bed of Shlomo. What is she doing in this bed? Who is she? Shishim Giborim Savivla. This bed is guarded by 60 mighty warriors. Migibori Yisrael, from the warriors of Israel, which we said are who remembers? The 60 myriads of Jewish people that came with the Mishkan through the desert. Right? There were 600,000 Jews, 60 myriads, that is 10,000s. 60 times 10,000. Who are these? These are the 60 warriors. The Jews are called the warriors of Israel. Kulam achuzei cherev, they're all holding the sword. Melumde milchama, they are learned in warfare. Ishchar bo al yerecho, each man with his sword upon his thigh. Mipachad balelos, from fear of the nights, which we said, what is the sword of the Jew? It is his erudition in Torah. What is the war of the Jew? It's the Melchemes HaTorah. It's the battle of Torah study. These are the warriors of Israel. They're the Torah learners. And they have to have their sword upon their thigh. They need to keep their Torah learning close with them at all times. Why? Mipachad balelos, because if the Torah would not be sufficiently learned, and the Torah would not be, God forbid, sufficiently observed, what will be the result of that? The result of that will be leilos. What did we see about leilos? Remember, al mishkavi balilos, the beginning of chapter 3. When I was upon my bed at nights, and Rashi said times of pain, times when the Jews were distanced from the Shekhinah, that's a nighttime, and the exile is a nighttime. We were afraid of leilos. We were afraid of a separation from the Shekhinah. We were afraid of an exile. We were afraid of the commensurate suffering that would occur if the Jews would not sufficiently observe the Torah. So that is the fear of leilos, that due to that fear, we've got our warriors with our swords at the ready, our Torah learning at the ready, always keeping our weapons sharp. Okay, that's a quick summary of verses 6, 7, and 8, which we already saw, which is why I rushed through them. Any questions before we go on to verse 9? Okay, so the rest of the parak is 9, 10, 11. I think that's it. Is there a 12th verse in that? No, 9, 10, 11. So if I don't know if you have a book in front of you, you could confirm that there's only 11 verses in chapter 3, or did I miss one? It seems pretty short, but we have, so 9, 10, 11, they kind of go together, but they're kind of explosive. So I want to do them. I want to hopefully see all three and have time to really discuss and sink our teeth in. Okay. So now here we come to verse number 9. I'm going to sing it and then I'll translate it. Apiryon asalo hamelech Shlomo me'atzei halevanon. Apiryon. Apiryon is, Rashi tells us, it is a chupas keser lekavod. And apiryon is a very fancy canopy. Rashi calls it a chupas keser, a canopy of a crown, some kind of royal canopy, lechavod, which is for honor, for glory, like a king's canopy, if you were. So Hamelech Shlomo, King Shlomo, made for himself an apiryon. He made a royal canopy for himself. What was the royal canopy? We're going to see. He made it from me'atzei halavanon, from the Lebanon trees. The Lebanon trees are cedars. They have white wood. That's why they're called Levanon, from the word Levan, meaning white. This is a very beautiful, very sturdy wood that was used in quality craftsmanship. Happens to be, by the way, the Mishkan was made out of cedar trees. That's a whole other parak over there, whole other parsha. How did the Jews get cedar trees in the desert? We'll talk about it another time. If you want to talk about it, we'll save it for the Q&A. So, and we know that the Beis HaMikdash was called Levanon. When Moshe is shown the land of Israel before he dies, God says, I'm going to show you as Har Hatov Hazed, this good mountain, which was Har Habayis, the mountain, the Temple Mount, V'ha Levanon, and the place of the Levanon, which was the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, was called Levanon. Rashi says, why was it called Levanon? Because it would whiten the sins of Israel. Lavan, white. So the temple, which would bring about atonement for the Jews through the sacrificial service, would whiten the sins of the Jews. It was called Levanon. But that's a homily, and on a more literal level, because it was made of cedar wood, which was white, and also because the cedars came from the geographical location of Lebanon, which we would call today Lebanon, when they built the Beis, when Shlomo himself literally built the Beis HaMikdash. Now, this is a parable, but when Shlomo literally built the Holy Temple, he did it in partnership with Hiram, the king of Tsor, which is Tyre, which occupied the Lebanon, that geographical area north of Israel called Lebanon, which had these cedar trees, and he got building materials from Hiram. So the King Shlomo makes himself a royal canopy out of cedar trees. Now we know from the parable that Hamelech Shlomo in Shir haShirim is
HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem himself. Hashem made a royal canopy out of cedar trees. What was this? Says Rashi, in case it's not totally obvious, he says this is Ohel Moed. This is the Ohel Moed, Shenikba b'Mishkan Shiloh. Now, he says a couple of things here. First of all, Ohel Moed, which was the walls, were made of cedar wood, the Atzei Shitim, as we know from the Torah. And Rashi says this Ohel Moed was Nikba. It was set in place where? b'Mishkan Shiloh. So Mishkan Shiloh, the Tabernacle of Shiloh, which we already spoke about, if you remember from back in the beginning of the chapter, where she says, I found the one my soul loved. I really want to revisit that because it's going to become relevant, those verses. When she says, I found the one that my soul loved, where was it? Here, in verse 4, rather, when she says, when I had just passed them, I found the one that my soul loved. I took hold of him. I will not let him go till I bring him to the house of my mother. We never really explained the house of my mother, hopefully today. Ve'el cheder horasi, and the room of my hora, either female parent, meaning mother, or hora, meaning conception. And Rashi there said that this is Mishkan Shiloh. What does it mean? She found him. She found him in Mishkan Shiloh, which was built under the leadership of Yehoshua in the land of Israel itself, right? That's what he says here. Had shehave Yosef el Mishkan Shiloh. So we're back to that. So all these verses in between that we just ran through, all they did was saying, I'm reunited. I'm in a great place with my beloved. Nations of the world, don't mess with this relationship. And in describing the entry of the Jewish nation into Israel from the desert, you see the reaction of the non-Jews being like, who's this coming up from the desert? And Yehoshua is coming with the Jewish people coming up from the desert. Right? Their minds are blown over here. And now we have the settlement in the land of Israel. Yehoshua settles down the Mishkan in a place called Shiloh, and that's where the divine presence rests. So this is just the straight continuation here. Okay, now, quick question on this before we move on to verse number 10 is, my question is, what do you mean that HaMelech Shlomo made himself this canopy of cedar in the Mishkan Shiloh? The Jews made the Mishkan Shiloh. Why does it say that Hashem made the Mishkan Shiloh? Go.
Where did they get the materials to make the Mishkan?
Okay, well, that was something I teased before. I'll tell you quickly. They brought it out of Egypt. In other words, in Parshas Truma, when God says, bring cedar wood, right? They're going to bring all these things to build the Mishkan. Bring cedar wood. Where did they get cedar wood from in the middle of the desert? The Chachamim asked, the rabbis asked, where did they get cedar wood? You don't have cedars growing in the middle of the desert. So rather, they took them out of Mitzrayim. What were the cedars doing in Mitzrayim? So it says that Yaakov Avinu, this is a huge topic, which I will only address very briefly, but you have to know it's explosive, okay? Rashi tells us that Yaakov Avinu took the cedars from Eretz Yisrael when he left Eretz Yisrael to go down to Mitzrayim, seeing ahead of time. This is Jacob saw through the divine spirit, Ruach HaKodesh. He saw into the future that the Jews would be stuck in Mitzrayim, and then they would come out into the desert and they would need to build a Mishkan. He said, where are they going to get the wood for the Mishkan? I have to prepare this. So in a certain way, Yaakov himself began the preparation for the building of the Mishkan. When he was in Be'er Sheva, it says, in other words, the Chumash tells us that Yaakov stops in Be'er Sheva on his way to Mitzrayim. Why did Yaakov stop in Be'er Sheva on the way to Mitzrayim? So our sages tell us, and Rashi tells us, that he stopped in Be'er Sheva because he wanted to cut down the cedars that were in Be'er Sheva to bring to Mitzrayim and replant. I guess he didn't cut them. He must have uprooted them. It says he transferred them. I forgot what that's called.
Correct.
Transplanted them from Be'er Sheva to Egypt, and they stayed there for 210 years until the Jews came out, and they took the cedars with them. What were the cedars doing in Be'er Sheva? Well, try to go fast. We all know that. I wasn't planning to talk about this. Avraham Avinu planted in Be'er Sheva. The Torah tells us Avraham Avinu, Abraham, the patriarch, planted in Be'er Sheva an Eshel. The question is, what is an Eshel? Rashi brings two opinions. One opinion is that it was a hotel, and one opinion is that it was an orchard. It was an orchard full of all kinds of fruit trees for people to eat from. He planted the Eshel. So now, what about if it was okay? Now wait. Comes Yaakov and he takes the Eshel that Avram, his grandfather, planted. He takes it with him to Mitzrayim. These are the cedar trees that they bring out, and they build the Mishkan from these cedar trees. Now, you should have questions burning and exploding in your brain right now. You should have fireworks going off in your brain. Rabbi Mallet, what are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. Go.
Why would he? Why would he have planted cedar trees? Because they're not fruit trees if he was planting an orchard.
Ooh.
Say that again. Ask it again.
Okay, so if Avram planted an orchard in Beersheba, he wouldn't have planted cedar trees because cedar are not fruit trees.
Oh, you're telling me that the cedar trees that Yaakov took from Beersheba was Avraham Avinu's orchard? This is what it says.
Mm-hmm.
Cedars are not fruit trees. And not only that, but I mean, even if they are, which I once brought this up and like, oh, there's 10 different species of cedars and some of them have fruit. Okay, no. So you have a couple of cedar trees that grow some berries. Very nice. Rashi says they grew all kinds of fruit. I don't know if I want to go into it. I was hoping you'd ask that question. I don't think I want to go into it.
All right.
I don't think I want to go into it. I want to leave it a
so
question.
Good.
Yes, it is a burning question. I'll give you a hint. The answer's in one of the classes that we already did. I don't remember which number, maybe class number 10. The one that we did, if you remember, about the esrog and the tapuach and the forbidden fruit.
Oh, man.
And there was Elon Esrak, the fruitless trees, and there was Elon Eitz. We said there was Eitz Osipri, a tree that makes fruit. There's Eitz Pri, a tree that is a fruit. There's Elon Sruk, trees that don't make fruit, right? I didn't address this question, but if you listen with an attentive ear, and I mean read between the lines of what's being said in those midrashim over there, and then ask the question about Abraham's Eshel, tell me if you don't come up with the answer. But that's just a little tease. Maybe we talk about it in the Q&A. Now, well, in the world was okay. I don't remember how I got on this.
The article.
Oh, my question was. But here was my. You took me for a detour. That wasn't the question I wanted you to ask.
I was just thinking about.
I asked this
where
question.
did we get the materials to build the temple?
Good. So I asked
which
this
is
question.
also to build the Mishkan.
All right. So I answered it. Sort of. I sort of answered it. the question is. Oh, I hear what you were trying to do, because I was asking, we built the Mishkan, and it says Hashem made a Mishkan. Well, who made the Mishkan? We did or Hashem did? So you were hinting, where did we get the materials? You know, it all comes from Hashem. So in a certain way, Hashem brought it about, you know, saying you want to kind of go like this and say, Hashem, you could call that Hashem. I don't disagree with you, by the way. I'm not putting down your, I think you're right. Everything is done by Hashem. You could always default to that. I wanted to say something slightly different, which is maybe just uplifting in a certain way, to me anyway. That very nice that we made a Mishkan, but you also may remember from previous classes, they made a Mishkan, but they weren't really excited and they weren't really happy about it until they saw the fire come down and they knew that the Shekhinah had returned to them. And Hinach Yafa, right? He says, Hinach Yafa Rayasi, behold, you're beautiful, my beloved. Hinach Yafa, and we talked in that class about, you know, you're beautiful in the creation of the Mishkan, and they say, Hinach Yafa Dodi, you're beautiful. Afnoim, also pleasant, that he praised the Mishkan, and they sang a song of praise to him for bringing his approval upon the Mishkan. So I want to say that Asa Lo HaMelech Shlomo, he made it, in other words, by expressing the creation of the Mishkan as God's creation is an expression of his approval of the creation, that it was done, so to speak, under God, if you will. It was God's will that this be made. He was happy with the creation of the Mishkan, and therefore he claims, because I made this Mishkan. In other words, it's what I wanted. That's on one level. But I want to say even more than that, maybe even more beautiful. It doesn't have to mean that he physically made the Mishkan, but sometimes you say, I made this place my home. I made this a home for myself. I didn't make the physical building. I didn't go and build the beams and the roof and the interior, but I found this structure and I made myself comfortable inside. I made this my home, you would say in English. Apirion asa lo hamelech Shlomo. Look at the words. Hamelech Shlomo made an apirion lo. He made it his own. It doesn't mean necessarily that he physically constructed it. The Jews physically constructed it. But asa lo, he made it his own. He said, I want to live here. I want to make this my home. So it's an expression, again, of the reuniting of the Shekhinah and the Jewish people in the Mishkan Shiloh. The approval of God that he says, I want to make myself comfortable here. This Mishkan is going to be my royal canopy. Okay? That's what I want to say here. Good?
That's beautiful. That's like the person who begins.
Say that again.
I was just thinking that's beautiful. It's like the person who begins a mitzvah and the person who finishes it.
That's something different than what I said, but that's also, in other words, the Mishkan wasn't complete until God was in it. So by going in it, he sort of completed the construction. We say the completion of a thing is called by the one who completes it, right? Al Shem Gomro, the one who completes it gets the credit. So Hashem completed the Mishkan by being present in it. That was the whole purpose of the Mishkan. By fulfilling the purpose of the Mishkan, he completed it. By completing it, it's called he made it. That's another explanation, and it's beautiful, and I love it. But I'm offering these other alternatives of just an expression of God's approval of the Mishkan as his home, and the rejoining and the reuniting of the love between the Jewish people and Hashem at this period that Rashi's identifying as Mishkan Shiloh under Yehoshua.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
Where did they get the idea to build the Mishkan?
Oh, okay. So that's also something Hashem told them, Asuli Mikdash, right? And here it's interesting that it says, Asalo, he made for him, and he tells the Jews, Asuli, make for me, right? He tells them to make for him, since it's hit by his command, that's also initiated by him. You could say that that's his creation. I accept that also. Yeah, but here's the point why I think it's more poignant than that. Because they already did that. Back in the desert. And they still lost the divine presence with the sin of the spies. So that was over and done with. But the fact that there's a resettlement of the Mishkan in Eretz Yisrael, and there wasn't a new command to build a Mishkan in Shiloh. God didn't again appear and say, build me a new Mishkan. No. That first command sort of expired because God came and left. But now that he comes back, so there's a renewed sense of love here that goes beyond the initial command. Is a reaffirmation that we're back together.
So it's like he's claiming it for himself.
Right.
He's confirming
that he made it his own. That's how I want to touch it. Good. Okay, now let's go on. Pasuk, because Yud Aleph is really the explosive one, and we're coming, rounding the bend of the hour. So here, Pasuk Yud, verse 10. Amudav asa chesef, rifida so zahav, merkavo argomon, tocho rotzof ahava, mi benos Yerushalayim. A difficult verse to translate. Only part of it though. Amudav asa chesef. Its pillars, asa chesef. He made of silver. Refida so zahav. His bed he made of gold. Now, if you remember Rapiduni Batapuchim, when she was feeling lovesick, Kicholas ahava ani. She says, well, I'm feeling lovesick. Rapiduni betapuchim, she says, you should do this verb, which we have here, refidaso. Do this to me with tapuchim, which we said, Rashi says, like, lay down a bed for me of tapuchim, and I'm going to lay on it because the smell, the fragrance of the tapuchim is restorative to my health, and I'm lovesick. So Rashi said, Rapiduni, lay down a bed for me. So here, refidaso zahav, his bed is made of gold. Merkavo argamon. Now, merkavo, a merkav, like a merkava is kind of like a chariot. But if it was a chariot, it would be merkava, feminine. It would be merkavaso, argaman. Argaman, by the way, means like a royal purple. I don't know if there's a English equivalent to it. Argaman. It's a royal purple. His Merkov, it means like something that he rides on, but it's not exactly a chariot. It's hard to translate, right? His ride is purple. Tocho ratzuf ahava. Its inside is ratzuf with love. Now, what is ratzuf? If I asked you, how would you translate the word ratzuf? What would you say?
Like to run?
Oh, because like rutz, running. Right. Okay, but what do you do with the fey over here? You see that there's a fey in the shorish. Ratzuf.
Oh.
So what I thought of is the word ritzpah. Now, the word ritzpah in modern Hebrew, ritzpah, is a floor. So if you say tocho, its inside is ratzuf be'ahava, I almost wanted to say like the floor of the inside was laid down with love, or the floor was love. It was floored with love. Tiled, you say like it was tiled with love. The tiles of the floor are made out of love. Now we're going to see it's not so clear that that's what this means at all. And I'll tell you, I don't know. I don't quite understand Rashi's translation, but most of the commentaries that I saw translates this from the word ritzpah, not meaning floor. And the question is, why does ritzpah even mean floor in modern Hebrew? And I have a theory on that. But the word ritzpah, when it comes up elsewhere in Tanakh, it means a burning coal. A burning coal is a ritzpah. So tocho ratzuf ahava, they want to say the inside is burning with love. The inside is on fire with love. Ratzuf ahava. Now, why does a floor mean that? So here's a quick theory. When you go to Megillas Esther, it describes Achashverosh's palace, and his palace is described as having ritzifas bahat vashesh v'dar v'sochares, a ritzpah of these precious materials, right? So I think it's translated as it had a floor of these materials. However, I think over there, what it means is that because the materials that made up the floor were glowing and shiny, like glowing stones, they resembled glowing coals. It's like a glowing coals shine, and they have a glow to them. So his floor was was made of such precious materials, shiny materials, that it glowed like a floor of coal, as though there were actual burning coals on the floor. And I don't want to go into it, but we find in the Sefer Yeshayahu the description of the reconstruction of Yerushalayim as being constructed with precious stones. And we have also in Yechezkel possibly a reference to the Beis HaMikdash being tiled with precious stones. So I think it's almost coincidental that we use the word ritzpah to mean a floor, because we find descriptions of very fancy, precious stones being used to build shiny floors that are described as burning coals, but it's sort of like a metaphor. The burning coal is a metaphor for like a shiny floor, because that's the only descriptions we have like that, are these shiny floors that are sparkling with precious materials that it's made from. So it really means like something sparkly. So my point is, I'm not an etymologist, but I think the modern Hebrew word ritzpah for floor is something of like it's borrowed, but it's not quite literal. So ratzuf over here, we're fooled to think, it means it's tiled on the floor with love, but I really think it means burning, and the association between the glowing tiles and fire is coincidental. So now, tocho ratzuf ahava, we'll say the inside is burning with love, but hold that in mind, the thing we said about floors and whatever. Mi benos Yerushalayim, from the daughters of Jerusalem. Now you're going to say to me, I know, the daughters of Jerusalem, before we said were the nations of the world. Here Rashi tells us the daughters of Jerusalem are the people of Israel, who brought the materials for the construction of the Mishkan. So the pillars are made of silver, and the bed was made of gold. We'll see what the bed is. You could guess already. We said the bed is the Aron. Fine. Okay, it is. Well, we already know that. Merkava, we'll have to see what that is made of purple color. Its inside is burning with love. All this was from the Benos Yerushalayim, from the people of Israel. Now we have to grapple with the fact that until now, Benos Yerushalayim, and we just read it a few verses ago, back in verse 5, the Benos Yerushalayim, the daughters of Jerusalem, were the nations of the world. Why were the daughters of Jerusalem the nations of the world? Rashi said, because in the future, when Mashiach comes, and all the nations will be tributary to Yerushalayim, so the relationship will be like that of daughters to Yerushalayim. So the nations are called now for the name in the future, which will be tributaries to Jerusalem, daughters of Jerusalem. But here, daughters of Jerusalem refers to the Jewish people. Why does it switch? Rashi doesn't give us any indication. My feeling is it depends where we are in the story. So when she's saying Hishbati Eschem, remember, Rashi says the framework of the whole Shir haShirim is she is in exile. This is a memoir. She's remembering the good times. So it's a flashback. She's in exile, the one who's saying the story. She's remembering about the Mishkan. But where is she speaking from? She's speaking from a place of exile. So when she's speaking from a place of exile, we refer to the daughters of Jerusalem being the nations of the world, referring to a future time when Mashiach is going to come. We're looking ahead to the future. However, when I'm in the story and I'm talking about what's going on in the story, and I'm talking about the Mishkan itself, so then the daughters of Jerusalem within the flashback is going to be the Jewish people. So depending where we are in time is who we're referring to when we say daughters of Jerusalem. I'm referring to this past event. The daughters of Jerusalem are the Jewish people when they were referring to the uniting of Hashem and the nation of Israel in the Mishkan. When she's in her present, which is the exile, and there isn't a Mishkan, and there isn't this state of unity. So then when she speaks of the daughters of Jerusalem, she's referring to in the future when the nations will be the daughters of Jerusalem. Fine. So let's unravel this. The silver pillars, Rashi doesn't bother explaining to us because the Mishkan had pillars of silver. Moving on. Now, what was the bed of gold? Rashi will tell us, like we said, the kapores was the cover of the ark, right? And we already know between the staves of the ark, that's where the Shekhinah rested. So you have the between the kruvim, between the cherubs, which were on top of the kapores, the cover. So the cover was made of gold. It was the resting place of the Shekhinah. That's the bed. The bed is gold. Easy, good. Moving on. Merkavo, Rashi says, is the paroches. The paroches is the curtain. Why was it called a merkav, which means something that rides? Rashi uses these words. Shahaya talui, it was hanging, the curtain was hanging, verochev, and in a sense, riding, by the fact that it was suspended above the ground. It wasn't resting on the ground, it was riding in the air. So it's called a merkav. That's the curtain which was hanging from poles, me'amad la'amad, from pole to pole. Fine. I'm going to leave it there. If you have a problem, stop me, but that's what we're going with. Now, Tocho, this is hard. This part is hard, okay? Tocho rotzef, the inside is rotzef, which I said either means like tiled or on fire. So Rashi says sadur means arranged. Now, arranged to me, it sounds a lot like the tiled translation, which is like modern Hebrew. But then he says, Sadur biritzpas ahava. It's arranged with a ritzpa of love. So if Sadur arranged was the translation of the word ratzuf, then why does he come back to ritzpa? You already told me what it is. So I have a feeling that Sadur is not the translation of ratzuf. Doesn't mean arranged. He's saying what was arranged. The ritzpah was arranged. What was the ritzpah? I don't know. But despite my temptation to say, like, the floor, which is what we say in modern Hebrew, ritzpah is the floor. Despite my temptation, I want to go with the majority of commentators that say it refers like it's hearkening to the imagery of the ritzpah, which is the burning coal. And it's so the ritzpas ahava, it's arranged with a burning love. Okay. And then Rashi says the following 4 words. Aron, I have no idea what he's doing. It's like he's describing the arrangement. Here's the arrangement of love. The arrangement of love inside the Mishkan. You ready? Here it is. Aron, that's the ark, right? V'chapores, its cover, which we described. Ukruvim, the cherubs above the ark. V'luchos, and the tablets. An arrangement of love. An arrangement of love. You've got the Aron with its cover. You got the Kruvim on top and the Luchos inside. Isn't that beautiful? Now, okay, it's an arrangement. It's an arrangement of things. They do go together. Aron, Kaporos, Kruvim, Luchos inside. I just wonder why he identifies this arrangement as being like the expression here of Toho Ratzuf Ahava. The insides are burning with love. He says there's an arrangement of things that are burning with love, and here's what they are. It seems strange and arbitrary to me. I don't know why it bugs me. I have 2 ways of dealing with it. I just want to know your thoughts. Are you comfortable with this? The inside, Toho Ratzuf Ahava, the inside is Ratzuf with love, whatever Ratzuf means. Rashi says it was, in other words, if it was floor, how does that make any sense? It's arranged with a floor of love. What's the floor of love? Aron v'chapores. You have the Aron, you have the cover, you have the Kruvim, and you have the Luchos inside. What does that have to do with a floor? Now, you want to tell me it was sitting on the floor? No. Right? You had a floor. On top of the floor was the Aron, the Kaporas, the Kruvim, the Luchos. You want to tell me that, you told me that the divine presence rests on top of the Aron, so it's underneath the divine presence, so it's like a floor. You have the Aron, the Kapores, the Luchos inside. These are all the floor, and then you have the Kruvim surrounding. But so the Kruvim weren't underneath. The Kruvim were on either side or covering on top. What does that have to do with the floor? Well, it was on top of the floor, right? It all falls apart. And also, you already told me, Rifidaso Zahav, its bed is gold. I already talked about the Kapores. Here it is. Here's the Kapores. It's the bed. The bed is the Kapores. Now you're calling it a floor. Well, it was on the floor. I mean, to me, it just doesn't create a picture that fits the words. So I don't understand Rashi. I have 2 approaches. Any thoughts before I go ahead?
Could it be a metaphor for saying that the foundation of this description that he's describing, which is the tabernacle, was founded in love? So in other words, the Luchos, the Aron, everything that we got was Hashem's love for us. And it's actually like proving his love to us because it's establishing something for his love to us. So that's what he's saying, is like everything that we have just described was given to us through Hashem, through his love for us. And so it was founded in love.
It was given to Hashem through love. I hear you. I'm not going to put it away. It could be. I just feel like, why specifically these things? I mean, they do kind of come together as a set. Aron, Kaporos, Kruvim, Luchos, but like just these things, again, it says Toho, it says inside. Inside what? Like inside the Kodesh Kadosh. This is what was inside. Maybe because you have the Paroches here and Toho inside, like behind the Paroches, was all these love objects. And this is what they were. The Aron, the Kaporas, the Kruvim, and the Luchos. This is what was inside of the Paroches, which he says is Merkavo Argamon. Okay, I mean, it could be.
This is like Yom Kippur. Like the
Yom Kippur, they come in and there's a love, there's a joining.
Like the greatest day because it's Yom Kippurim, day like Purim. the day that expresses that infinite love between Hakadosh Baruch Hu and Israel that goes
Love.
beyond all
Yeah,
understanding.
I grant you that. I think that's
Love
true.
covers
I think
sin.
that's all true. I'm having a hard time, I think, articulating why Rashi's wording troubles me. That he says it's arranged in a ritzpah of love, and again, trying to. Well, what does he mean by ritzpah? And then he enumerates these 4 items: aron v'chapores, uchruvim v'luchos. I guess he just means inside, beyond the paroches, tocho ratzuf ahava. So, I guess.
I think Dr. Deutsch has something.
It just occurred to me that maybe we can just try to look at it more literally and say, okay, we have evidence archaeologically of these mosaic floors that were created inside, and that perhaps the referent to Achshverosh's palace with the stones inlaid into the floor. And so it's possible that a pattern or a scene was depicted in the flooring that was made with these bright colored stones or gems. Go literal.
Maybe. Yeah. I'm not. It's not clear to me from Rashi's wording. I had a couple of ways of approaching Rashi that I'm not even sure that they do much better than what's been offered here. And maybe the problem isn't as big as I'm making it. Like, okay,
Rabbi.
you go beyond the paroches and you have this arrangement of things, the aron, the kaporos, the kruvim, and the luchos, and that's called ahava. I find it weird. I don't know why I find it weird. I'm wondering if I should even share with you how I wanted to approach this.
Could I mention one thing about Ratzuf?
Yeah.
It's the same gematria as shalom. So when he's really talking about this pavement, because one of the translations is to be fit together, and we talk about how shalom brings unity between opposites. And so okay. you have.
I'm not doing the math. I'm telling you right now, I'm not doing the math, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, it's 376 is the gematria for Ratzuf and also for Shalom.
It's okay. I like it. I don't see that Rashi's saying that, but in other words, I think on its own it stands. I said I wanted to say the following thing. I think Pasuk Yud Aleph is a very big pasuk. We might leave it for next week. Okay. And that'll conclude the chapter. But just because we're coming really to the end, I don't want to rush through Yud Aleph. Yud Aleph is this. Yud Aleph is where I have all this ridiculous rabbit hole stuff. Okay, it's not happening in 3 minutes. So let me share with you what I felt about these verses, and Yud Aleph will be next week's subject. We'll cap off the chapter. I wrote here in the notes a couple of approaches. One is I thought maybe Rashi was trying to hint with the word ahava. In other words, it's in the verse. Tocho ratzuf ahava. The inside is, again, what? Floored with love, tiled with love, burning with love? I don't know. But why does he say that? And you know what that is? That's the Aron Kaporos Kruvim V'Luchos. That maybe he's understanding this as some type of an acronym, and it almost sounds silly, but it takes care of a different problem, which is why does he mention the kaporis again? You told me the bed was the kaporis, and now when you get to Tocho Ratzuf, you mention it again. Like, why does it come up twice? So if the aleph is a remez to Aron v'chapores, because that's why I bolded these letters. I did that. Because this is a unit. The Aron with its cover. In other words, he made a point of pointing out the cover before. So he's now bringing it together and saying the Aron with its cover is Aleph in the word Ahava that the verse uses. He's saying, why is it called Ahava? So maybe this is what Rashi means. Ahava is Aleph. Aron v'chapores. Okay, ready? You have a hey and a hey. Okay, what's hey and hey? The luchos.
2 tablets.
And you have a base, which is
A
2,
house.
and that's the kruvim. The kruvim, there was 2 kruvim. There was 2 luchos, but the luchos were 5 and 5. And there was an aron kaporos. These all things were inside beyond the kapor, the paroches, same letters. Paroches, kaporos, right? So tocho rotz of ahava, sadr beritzpas ahava. It's arranged with, again, I don't like floor. I'm happy to say a sort of a burning love, but Rashi's not bothering with ritzpah. Whatever it means, he's assuming you know, but he's bothered by ahava. What is ahava? Maybe what Rashi is, and then he goes aron kaporos kruvim luchos. So maybe he's unraveling the word ahava. Aleph for aron v'chapores, which is, you could say also 1 because it's 1 unit. Kruvim is the base, and luchos is hey and hey. If you take those letters, rearrange them, it spells ahava. So it's poetic. It's poetic. I'm taking letters that represent the items that are inside the Kodesh Kodashim, and I'm taking the items in the Kodesh Kodashim and I'm turning them into the word ahava. It's like, what do they call it? It's like visual poetry, right?
Yes.
I'm turning them into the word ahava. I just took the 4 things in the 3, whatever you want to call them, aron v'chaporos, luchos, and kruvim, and I turned them into a word, ahava. So
that's
nice.
Legit. That's amazing.
So I like it. I don't know if Rashi's doing that, but it satisfied me. Here's
that's what you're doing.
second.
My mind was going there the whole time. Now that you laid it out like that, it's like,
you can see
that's
it.
exactly.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm not convinced. Second approach is Rashi's showing how everything inside the Kodesh Kodashim was in pairs. Everything was in pairs, and that's ahava. The love is the joining of one with the other, which obviously is going to represent the joining of Hashem with the Jewish people. But even inside the Kodesh Kodashim, everything's in pairs. You have a pair of kruvim, you have a pair of luchos, and the luchos also, we know the kruvim represent 1 for Hashem and 1 for the Jewish people. And we know the luchos also represent 1 for Hashem and 1 for the Jewish people. Because one of the tablets was between man and God, and one of the tablets was between man and man. So you have a tablet for God, and you have a tablet for man. You have a kruv for God, and you have a kruv for Yisrael. And then aron v'kapores. I feel like, again, it's a stretch, but he's making aron v'kapores the last coupling. There's an aron and there's a kaporos. It's in 2 parts. Which one belongs to us and which one belongs to God? If I had to venture a wager, I'd say the lower segment, which is the aron, is ours, and the Torah goes in it because the Torah came down, and we are the receptacle for the Torah. That's us. And there's a lot made about the aron being wood on the inside and gold on the outside, about midos and things like that. A person should always be growing like wood. He should be the same inside as outside, sterling. Leaving that aside, so the aron itself could represent us, and the cover of the aron could represent Hashem because it's the upper part, not the bottom part. So covers over us. But also that was the resting place of the Shekhinah, was on the kaporos, as Rashi pointed out before. Umishkano al ha-kaporos, shehu zahav. Rafida, so his bed is the kaporos. He doesn't say the aron, Rashi. He says his bed is the kaporos, right? He's on top, we're underneath. So that's my second attempt to understand how Rashi is explaining the word rotz of ahava, the words rotz of ahava, as aron v'chaporos u'chuvim meluchos. I'm like, what do you want from me? So again, either it's visual poetry, aleph for aron v'chaporos, hey for luchos, and base for kruvim ahava, or it's pairs. Everything is pairs. Aron v'chaporos, shnei kruvim, shnei luchos. Everything is love. Everything is pairs. Everything is joining of Hashem and Klal Yisrael. Okay, here we'll pause. And any questions before we go on? I mean, before we call it a night. Okay. If there's no questions, then then I'll leave it there. I teased something about the trees, but I'm not hearing that. People want to go there, so we'll call it a night.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. So next week we'll conclude chapter 3 with a very exciting verse that caps off the trio that we did tonight. Well, it's not really a trio. It was supposed to be a trio. Tes, Yud, and Yud Aleph were going to be the trio. So I guess you could say it caps off the trio. But just to give you like a sneak peek, here's this Rashi is like gigantic Rashi over here. Okay.
Wow.
So if Rashi goes at length to quote what he quotes over here, it's definitely worthwhile. So I did a lot of research. Anyway.
And all your screenshots.
Looking forward to
Right.
it. Have a great evening.
Yes.
Okay, so stay tuned for next week. Thank you for coming. Everyone should have an Eloi Neshama that we named in the beginning of the class, or
Amen.
Refuah Shlema, and we should all be elevated from the learning. Should carry us through till next week, Be'ez Hashem.
Amen. Shavua Tov. Toda rabba.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
Shavua Tov. Have a great night.
Good night.
Thank you, Rabbi.